going on, everybody? Gunnar here, and today we are going to tie the hollow point. Now, I kind of already have this video online, but it's an old one. It goes really fast. I don't really explain anything, and I've updated it a little bit, and I'll give you some pointers on how to tie it correctly. So, this is, by all means, an articulated trout fly. That's what it was designed to do. It's a weightless kind of swim fly, a little bit of a jerkbait head. It's not super keeled, so you get a little belly wobble and it catch up drafts, and it's just a swimmy fly that I don't know, it's my favorite, honestly. It's probably been the most productive fly I've fished all year, except for maybe a super jerk. They're pretty close to each other. So we'll just start tying, and I might have to turn down the music or else I'll get in trouble with copyright. But the tail, so the back hook is a number 1, nope, it's a number 2, sorry, Attitude streamer from Partridge. It's a nice extra long shank, probably about medium thickness wire, so it's a really nice streamer hook, especially for the back because of its light wire. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. This is strung Chinese saddle hackle. It's a little bit more schloppany, although the tail is the same as the marabou minnow. I typically tie these hackle stems in. This isn't working out. I typically tie these in maybe a full 1/4 inch longer because the top wing material on the front hook is going to add some bulk backwards that the marabou minnow doesn't have. So these stems are flattened, right? And I just took my scissors, I reinforced the way they are flattened and put them on top of the hook, and that's how you get a nice wide feather that doesn't want to roll on you, right? Then we're coming in with some Hedron Flashabou holographic gold. This is the original holographic right on top, and then we're gonna cut 2 of these short and 2 of these long just to build a little taper into that flash. And then we're coming in with some UV polar chenille. I like to catch quite a bit of this so that it can't get pulled out. Tag that even with the hackle. And we'll leave about a hook eye up front to stack our marabou. Now when you're wrapping chenille, this is the base for this is nylon, right, which is relatively elastic. And something that you want to do is about every 3 wraps around this hook, it helps if you just give this a good little tug. And what you're doing is you're making sure that you're taking basically all the stretch out of that material so that you are super tight to that hook shank, and that's going to give you the most durable body. Because abrasion wise, this is relatively durable, but if a tooth is able to get in and lift the cord up from the shank, it'll cut it just as easily as you can with your scissors. So that's probably the most durable way to do it, is every 3 wraps or so you kind of just pull on that elasticity and set that into the hook. So we got that going on. What I'm going to do is come in and I'm going to stack olive on top, yellow on bottom. We're kind of tying a bluegill-y perch sunfish pattern. I guess it could also be a juvenile trout of some sort. But the same way, what did I do with my marabou? The same way that we did the marabou minnow, you're going to come in and you're going to preen these marabou fibers off of the stem, right? That way we kind of get a better distribution. You can kind of use webbier feathers, and it allows us to control our top and bottom colors, right? Because when I tie this in, say, all white, or if I tie it in a kind of like a golden white blend, I'm going to use basically the full length on this, by the way. I'll typically palmer this, right? And when I palmer, yeah, just watch the Triple Sculpt Daddy video because I go into depth about why I palmer things the way I palmer them. But normally base to tip to reinforce the taper of the feather and to maximize the amount of tips that are exposed. And I found that this kind of ripping it off and tying it in like this mimics that fairly well. So next best thing. Now, if I have the choice, I'm going to do the bottom sparser, then I'm going to do the top. And that depends on your marabou and how webby it is. And aside from doing it slightly sparser, I like to do it slightly shorter. So I always measure it off the top wing before I flip my vise over, right? Cutting these perfectly square. It actually helps to get this in place if you purposely hook yourself. Just know that. You will hook yourself, so if you do it on purpose, it won't surprise you. And then you take your thumbnail, right, and you spread that out so that you get a nice even distribution. And then you got to cinch that down so you don't lose any feathers, right? And I'm tying with a 100 strand GSP. And a long time ago, here's a story for you. You know, like I basically grew up on Kelly Gallup ties and videos, and like I've been tying with gel spun for like 6 or 7 years now. And when I started Brammer's Custom Flies, I was like, oh, I want to try my own threads. And I tried power threads and flat wax nylons and all this stuff. And after a year of having my own business, I am back to 100 strand GSP. It is simply the best streamer thread. Just use it. And for anybody who's tying muskie and pike stuff, and you're doing bucktail work, it'll blow your mind if you're used to using a standard whatever. So I just threw a little marker on top, so we got olive top, white bottom, and that is the tail. Really simple, fast, done. Cool. Coming in front hook is a 2/0 attitude streamer, so the same hook model, right? In that 2/0, that large gap is mainly our keeling force. I need some coffee. And that's what's going to right this fly. And one of the issues I had when I used to do the reverse tie up front is, well, basically, because I had 2 of them, the eyes started to compress one of them, and they kind of overpowered the keeling effect of the hook. And for whatever reason, I definitely prefer weightless flies and full sinking lines. I think you get a much better action out of it. So I started doing a straight back tie, and you're going to see I'm going to do a thread dam. I don't know what that is, like a centimeter maybe, behind that hook eye. And that's so I can seat my eye on here without pressing that bucktail laterally. So the eyes are the sole action giver, not the compression of the bucktail, because that'll overpower the hook cap. So something I'm going to do right here is where we're going to stack our bucktail. And I want to do a thread dam before I do my articulation. And if you take your thread and you spin it clockwise, speed that up, and you spin it clockwise, right? This is a flat thread, right? It's a, what am I using? 100 strand GSP is a flat thread. And something that's really hard to do with a flat thread is build a thread dam, right? Because it's going to build something that's level and smooth, and basically it'll fall off each other. And the same thing happens when you're doing a reverse tie with bucktail and you need to build a thread cone up to that bucktail. Spinning your thread clockwise, because I'm wrapping clockwise so that they kind of reinforce each other until you use all the thread that's in the barrel. What it does is it gives you a round thread, and a round thread has volume, so it's going to build faster, and it also creates more friction because you increase the micro topography, something like that, of your, you make a rougher surface that has a higher coefficient of friction, so your thread will grip onto itself better, and you can build a steeper, smaller dam more accurately, easier, and hopefully with less effort. So I'd like to do the thread dam for mental spacing, and it stops me from crowding that hook eye and screwing up the action of my bug. Running wire down, I like to do these straight hard pulls down, compressing that nylon coating in my wire. That way I don't have to fold anything back or tie it in twice or do anything like that. This is a 3D bead, by the way, from Hairline Dubbing. These are slick. I was using a very similar bead from Michaels, and these come in like the same diameter, and I really like them because most of my flies, almost all of them, are single bead flies for spacing, right? And the spacing, the idea behind the bead is that it stiffens the wire so that your hooks don't basically wrap underneath each other, right? So that's all they're there for. And I like to That's about good. And something that I like to do, I got it from Kelly actually, is you want to put a little kink in this wire to seat that eye on there so it won't come up on top of the wire and get tangled. So what you can do while you're tying this in is push that bead back into that eye, and you use the pressure from the bead to kink the wire while you're tying this in. Right, and that's, I don't know, that's what I found to be the easiest. I like to do this wire down and back as one separate process because I can control not allowing my wires to twist with inside that bead, and it guarantees that my back hook is going to be vertical, basically, is what it allows me to do. Cool beans. So we're coming back down now. That's all secure. Back to the UV polar chenille. Now I don't have a connection over this bead, which a lot of flies have, and it's simply because I have such a long kind of winging material going backwards that I don't need anything back there. And the UV polar chenille does a pretty good job of kind of masking that bead anyway. And the bead, being a 3D bead, is kind of glossy and it has a nice little light reflectance to it. It's kind of like a hot spot. So doing the same thing we did last time, right? Going over top of itself, giving that a little kind of compression wrap there. I'm going to stop talking so I can fast forward real quick. So now the thread is in the thread dam. I didn't trap very many fibers. So one thing that I'm doing with this UV polar chenille is it's called touching wraps, right? And basically what that means is each wrap around the shank, the material cord is actually touching itself. Touching wraps, open spirals when they're not touching, right? But I always preen it back as I palmer. I want this to be nice and dense kind of core. And the reason I use UV polar chenille, I don't really care for if UV works or not. It's not that. I like the UV strands because they're like opaly, they're transparent, and I think it gives it a really nice belly texture to the fly. So that's the reason why I use them. But coming up, so we're doing the bluegill pattern, right? And I like to use this light blue bucktail on top and yellow bucktail on the bottom. And something to look for when you're doing hollow points is I like my bucktail to have a little bit of wave to it, because you're not going to want a lot of bucktail, and the wave kind of builds an illusion of kind of volume to the fly. And you don't need a lot of strands, maybe 15 to 20 strands will be on top, and slightly less. If we do 15 on top, you usually do like 10 on the bottom. It's not a big deal. But take out your really short fibers. These are pretty long, so I'm actually going to separate these and restack my tips. So you can see my butts are uneven now, which is fine. And I like this wing to be halfway down my back. So here's my marabou plume. You can see these tips are halfway down my marabou. I'm going to call that good. Cut that square. Lay that right on top, loose wrap. Boom. Now I'm going to leave this up just like we did on the back so I can measure my yellow bucktail off my blue bucktail and make sure I don't tie it in too long. Stacking my tips again, cutting those off. That's like perfect. It's about right there. And again, you kind of got to hook yourself right here. But if you do it on purpose, it doesn't hurt that bad. And then something that I like to do, give that 2 wraps and kind of pinch this as you cinch that down to stop it from rotating, right? And then you can come back up and flatten it. And flattening it is going to help it stabilize a little bit. It's mostly going to end up round at the end, so it doesn't really matter. And I think I just messed everything up. Let me see if I save this. Something you can do with gel spun thread, especially in the 100 size, is pull so hard that you can literally cut it through hair material, especially deer hair. It normally doesn't happen with bucktail. Okay, everything's good to go. So, lateral lines basically is what we're coming in with. It's kind of like a sideline flash. It's not a big deal. You can use micro lateral lines. For whatever reason, when I designed this the first time, I didn't, and this is just a crystal accent. And I took a full strand, cut it in half, and we're going to 50-50 it on each side of the fly. So something I didn't mention, that bucktail, it's relatively important that you get some bucktail that's going to compress a little bit and flare, right? Because that's going to help build some bulk into this fly. And typically that wavy bucktail on the blue one especially, for whatever reason, every blue one I get is really, it compresses really nicely, pretty high up into that fly, so it's really usable for these hollow points and kind of true to its demise. But you want a compressible bucktail. I know I say this a lot, but towards the base, the butt is more compressible, more trapped air. It flares like deer hair, kind of, right? Up at the tips, basically no air, it doesn't flare a lot. So there you go. That's the short version. I need more coffee, so hold up. So we're kind of doing a head that I got from Andreas Anderson. It's this reverse craft fur head that uses UV resin to reverse and control the fibers. And basically the height of this fly in particular and that kind of head style is really determined by the eyes and how you allow that resin to control the shape. So one thing that I added to it is ice dub shimmer fringe down the back, and I absolutely love this stuff. But if you do not prep this correctly, it'll be a pain in the butt because it has a lot of shorter fibers up in here. And when you go to reverse this, and the same thing happens with the craft fur, when we get there I'll tell you, but you want to take out those short fibers. Like I'm going to preen out the bottom inch of this so that when I go to fold this back later, I can grab the tips, I can grab up an inch and hold everything back, and I don't have shorter fibers coming out and getting in the way. It's a real pain in the butt. Now this stuff is pretty slippery, and I have a full centimeter to work with, right? So we're going to utilize this whole kind of shank behind the eye here. I'm going to trim off that welded section. I'm going to grab up about an inch, and I'm going to preen out those short fibers. So when you cut this, cut a little bit extra because you're going to be preening out and losing fibers, but you don't want so much of it because it'll all cling together and it'll actually dampen the effect that you're looking for, right? Because you want this head to be relatively bulky, and it's free bulk because it's all from eyes, right? And so when you overdress with this shimmer fringe, it kind of like bogs everything down. But tying it in nice and sparse, the water will be able to move each individual fiber and breathe bulk into the fly. So I'm just going to simply hold this back, be like, yep, that's the length of my bucktail. Transfer hands and put that right on top. And something that you do, well, for a lot of fly tying situations, but you tie things kind of on your side of the hook, right? Like I kind of put that on like the top eighth, then you use the torque, the rotational force from your thread to bring it all the way up on top, right? And make sure that it's kind of aligned, right? So we're going to use that same kind of thread torque idea with all the craft fur. And the top stack is dark olive craft fur. And again, you want to kind of over prep it, right? Because we're going to be taking out all the short fibers so that we can control it much easier when we go to do our head design. And something that is important to know, we're going to do 2 stacks on the bottom because we're going to do a fade from an orange throat to a yellow belly. I'm just going to comb this out. And so you want to make sure this top stack is whatever twice you do on the bottom, or your bottom's twice whatever you did on top. So pulling out those short fibers, really making sure that's good. I'm going to match the proportions or length to my ice dub shimmer fringe because we already measured that. Catch that, wrap it backwards first. Trim those butts off, flip it upside down. Now what you have is you can see your hook eye now that it's upside down, and as you go and tighten this forward, you can make sure you do not crowd that hook eye. Now when you tie your bottom stacks of craft fern, you simply match your bottom stacks to the thread wraps that you have on top, and that'll prevent you from crowding your hook eye, which is a pain in the butt. This is like a fiery orange, and I really like fishing. Like this would be a great kind of color combo when brown trout are moving up to spawn a really aggressive belly. Something to kind of get their attention would be awesome. Or during, you know, perch and everything else. But so we have a nice fiery orange. The orange is a little thicker and shorter. And I'm going to preen out the short fibers again. But I want this short, maybe half of what the olive is. We're just going to catch that, wrap it backwards again, trim off our butts, flip it over, and then match our thread wraps that we set with the olive so we don't crowd the hook eye. Back down she goes for some yellow. This is the only thing I didn't prep for the video because I figured I'd be talking. Now the yellow, right? That orange is kind of our bulk, right? So something you can do with the yellow is you can pick out even more of that underfur because we just want the yellow to be on our belly section. And I'm going to match that, maybe a hair shorter than what I have on top. Now this craft fur, same with that bucktail, everything's going to blend back and kind of create this like 70-30, 65-35 proportion. Sometimes you got to get in there and pinch that level. And then you're just going to come up. You can throw glue on your thread if you want. Just do a finger whip finish. And then we'll come and put one clean dab right on top of that knot. Okay, we're done. All we got to do is put some eyes on that sucker and voila. So, yep, I'm going to let that glue dry and drink some more coffee. Unfortunately for you guys, I need my light for this or else I'm going to be making some mistakes. So, 8.5 millimeter eyes are the ticket, or 8 millimeter, whatever you want to do. For the bluegill pattern, I really like these, the wind colored living eyes from Flyman Fishing Company. And it's a really nice, high quality eye that's gonna, yeah, it just kind of brings the fly to life on this one. But you need a little push tool. You can just use your hands if you don't have one, it's not a big deal. But it's just gonna help you separate this craft fur. And just rough it up with your fingers, kind of manhandle it a little bit. Get it where you want. And you'll see something about this. This is like one of the only flies, I guess not one of the only ones, but it has like almost no friction up front, right? This is a really slick head. It has almost no water drag up front. There's not any bulk on that front hook at all, basically. And you get this really light, airy fly that's basically all illusion. It actually doesn't have any bulk on it, you know what I mean? And it's cool. Like you could probably throw this on a 5-weight, and it's a 5.5 inch bait fish pattern, so that's kind of cool. So we got our living eyes. I'm just going to use a really quick, I got a bad line going over here. I'm going to use gel super glue to secure these. And one of the benefits of doing the head sparse is that gel is going to physically seep in to those thread wraps that are securing everything and make a really durable head. And it's going to allow those eyes to have a solid base to kind of glue onto. And that's going to help with the durability. But we're going to make a UV epoxy head over top to kind of finalize everything. Now I like to set these in just a hair from the hook eye, and you basically use the hook eye as your guide for what is level on the fly. It's a little tricky, but I'm sure you'll be alright. Don't mess it up. And we'll just pinch that, and we'll let that set. A little tip for you. You probably will super glue your fingers to the eyes when you're pushing these together. Don't panic and rip your finger off because you'll pull that eye off the head. Instead, peel your finger back and allow that glue to kind of use a shear force away from your finger, and that'll keep your eye on the fly. If these do not adhere to the base, you can kind of lift up the craft fur and put a dab behind the craft fur and get that to lay down. So what you see is we have this kind of narrow, high-profile bait with that bucktail, the craft fur bleeding into the bucktail. We have this nice, about 5.5-inch silhouette that's really fusiform in shape, a really fishy kind of bait fish shape. And I left some short. These are going to be a pain to work with. You can kind of just pluck these out if they get in your way. I think I tied that orange in so short that I didn't pick up the fibers enough. Okay, so we're coming in with some Deer Creek. I'm going to use the Flex resin on this head. I tied one of these and fished it. I literally have fished the same one all summer. Like, it's probably caught 50 smallies and the eyes are still on the thing. It's pretty badass. It doesn't happen all the time. Occasionally, for whatever reason, you know, the eyes might last 10 fish. Sometimes they last forever. I haven't quite figured that one out yet, but this is the most durable way I have found to do it thus far. So we got our nice long fibers because we preened out most of the short ones. Apparently I didn't get all of them. What I like to do is we're going to take this UV resin and we're just going to make a bridge over top of the eyes. So you want to do this kind of a step at a time, right? If you try to do too much, it's going to get away from you really quick. So put a nice healthy dab on there right over top of the eyes, and then we're going to lift that up and cure it, right? And that lift is going to set the angle of that resin and help put a little bulk in there. And that doesn't need a lot to cure with that 3-watt torch. It does it pretty quick. We're going to do the exact same right here on the bottom. Again, I'm kind of ripping out these fibers that got away from me when I was doing this. And instead of curing it way down there, lift that up, give that some bulk and body and volume, and then set that resin. Right, now you can probably do this without resin. You can probably get some super glue down there, or I honestly don't know what you do. You probably need resin. But yeah, if you do look for resin, Deer Creek is the bomb. Tack free is the bomb. So now that we kind of have it roughly done, you can add another layer on top. If it kind of gets away from you, you can use a bodkin. Even that out, make it look nice. Something you want to keep in mind when you're doing this is you want to keep that resin head nice and light, while obviously trying to make it as durable as possible. But the whole idea behind the hollow point, well, originally I had a reverse tie in there, so it was like a hollow fly, right? But that whole front hook is supposed to be super sparse, like nothing is there. You have a very sparse bucktail wing, you have this kind of reversed craft fur head, and really that's about it. And that is a hollow point, kind of in a bluegill perchy color. And what you can see, some of that bucktail is pretty flared, and a lot of that is static between the fibers, and a lot of that is just, I don't know, it just ties in that way. But if you get it wet and you let it hang dry or whatever you do, if you get it wet, those fibers will kind of tame down and you have this like perfect silhouette bait fish. So yeah, I think I was trying to say you want to keep that resin head nice and light so that that fly hovers and catches water. If you overdo the head, if you are way too concerned about, you know, durability, you're going to get a heavy resin head and it'll start to drop on you. And keeping that resin nice and light is going to maximize your action. So there you go. You got a nice tack-free, durable, basically marabou craft fur deceiver that holds no water. You can throw this thing, you know, 5-weight, 6-weight, whatever you got, and it's a machine. This thing is a bass machine. If you are fishing this for bass and you have northern pike in your water, put a leader on because I guarantee you 100% of the time that northern will take this thing all the way into his belly and he will break you off. So thanks for watching. Hope you guys found this more helpful than my 5-minute tutorial that's way too quick and not in depth at all. And give it a try. Tie it. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.